So I am here today with a friend of mine and a great guy who's been in this industry, the virtual industry, for about as long as it's existed, Doug Griffin from Loom.AI. Thanks for joining, Doug.
Bob, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you. I can't remember the topic for this Friday. What was it? You had some big thing coming up.
Yeah, I'm
Was it with
talking about the
Epic or something?
metaverse. And
The Metaverse. Perfect.
I might touch on that with you a little bit too.
Yeah.
And what's happening, because I think, you know, obviously avatars are going to be a piece of that.
Yeah.
And what's the implication for you know, for artificial selves in you know, in a real, in the new real world that we're going to be living in at some point, because I see that happen. I see that as clear as day now. Like,
Yeah.
fucking coming.
Well, that's what got me interested in VR in the beginning, because I've done a lot of work with avatars over the last 20 years. And so that was the thing that really kind of drew me in, was when I was at FaceShift.
So let's talk about that. Talk about your background and what got you to this point. Like, why are you here?
Oh, that's if you want the long story, I could go into that. But, you know, I actually started out as an athlete, and I was a graduate student of exercise physiology, but recognized that the thing that was really holding me back was my biomechanics, not my physiology. And I made a switch in graduate school to study biomechanics. And that year is when the PlayStation 1 came out and the first Toy Story movie came out and 3D games really took off. And my roommate was an animator for Sony and just got me inspired. I saw what the biomechanists were doing in recording human movement, and I saw what the 3D animators were doing in trying to make avatars, make CG characters move. And I thought, wow, these two fields could really be combined to do something special. So that's kind of where I started, and that was 25, 30 years ago now.
Wow. And now you come from a Hollywood background, right? So how did that wind up playing into your career?
Yep. So, yeah, my first real professional job was with a company called Biovision. And there were two Mocap service companies in the world, Biovision and Acclaim. And I came in and kind of took over their Mocap studio. So I was running the Mocap studio and the interface between sort of the athletes or actors and the game producers who would come in to record stuff for their games. And about a year later,
in the early days of like really video games, like, you know, I did a Tiger Woods PGA Tour game. We turned it into an arcade game, and we got to watch, you know, Tiger in the black suit with the ball.
Yeah.
Is that the stuff that you guys were doing?
Yeah, literally putting the ping pong balls on people and working with them. And so I spent a lot of time with directors and with actors and athletes, helping them transfer that motion of a real person onto a game character.
Cool.
And about a year later, ILM gave me a call, and they were just starting up their Mocap studio for this space trilogy thing that they wanted to do. I don't know if you'd heard of it, but so I joined ILM, and I was at ILM for 8 years. And what a privilege to work with incredibly smart people there, all through the organization. And the Mocap group was within the R&D group, and we became sort of the physical embodiment of R&D. So if there was new technology around photogrammetry or match move, or, you know, Mocap using, you know, video cameras, whatever those things might be, we were on the front lines sort of helping to develop and test and utilize that tech. And so
there's so many things I want to ask you about. Like, there's just go off of that. And one of the ones, which is a bit off topic, I think, of avatars, but because of your background, it's interesting to me, the stuff that Jon Favreau is doing with virtual reality in cinematography, and, you know, what started with The Lion King and then now The Mandalorian, and using Unreal Engine and virtual sets, and what do you think of that?
I think it's amazing, and you know, all of that was just starting during my time at ILM. And so Jon Favreau actually came in for a test for a film that never actually got produced, but they were certainly pushing in that direction at one point. We did a lot of work on facial animation, from actors, tracking, thousands of little dots on someone's face and trying to drive a really high resolution mesh of a character from that. Really groundbreaking, cool stuff. And it was within my time at ILM, I got really inspired. We worked on The Mummy Returns was our first foray into real-time motion capture.
Was that with The Rock?
And so, no, not with The Rock. He was in that film, but he wasn't the actor that we were working with. We had shot motion capture for The Mummy, and it worked really well, except it was a guy on a studio in one of these mocap suits, and he had no frame of reference in what was around him. So a couple years later, Mummy Return came back, and we decided, let's try to build this real-time ability so at least the director could see if the action of the actor matched everything on the plate, on the live action plate that was shot 6 months earlier. So we were the first people to use real-time motion capture from an optical system. And that was really inspiring. And it gave us a very quick, immediate feedback on whether the actor was kind of hitting his marks, both from a timing perspective and from a positional perspective.
Yeah, interesting. And now Kieran Bott, who's one of your co-founders at it's Loom.AI is the name of the company, right?
Say that one more time.
It's so Loom.AI is the name of the company.
Yep. Uh-huh.
And I think Kieran Bott, who's your co-founder and CTO,
yep,
he won an Academy Award for some of this stuff at ILM, right?
Yeah, we didn't cross paths there. We missed each other by a couple years, but he really pushed the boundaries on the facial pipeline. In fact, I met him years later in my career. I'd left ILM. I'd gone up to EA. I came back to California to help Bob Zemeckis start up a film studio. And then I joined a group called FaceShift, and we had created a real-time facial tracking system that used depth cameras. And I met Kieran during that time, my time with FaceShift.
Now, did you have any idea at that point in time that every mobile phone in the world would have a depth sensing camera in it?
Yes. I didn't. I had no technical knowledge that this was going to happen, but I've actually found videos. You could look back and find stuff 5 years ago. Oh, actually about 7 years ago now, about me saying, one day Apple's going to buy PrimeSense, and these depth sensors are going to be embedded into mobile phones, and then you'll be able to do this sort of thing, directly from your phone. And that's exactly what happened. They bought PrimeSense a bit later. That was an Israeli company that made the depth sensor that was originally in the Microsoft Kinect.
Yeah.
And then they end up buying our company, FaceShift. This was probably 5 years ago. And that ended up becoming Face ID and Memoji. So the tech that we were working on years ago, is now the broadest use of facial motion capture on the planet.
Yeah, it's amazing. Now you guys have, so talk a little bit about Loom.ai and what you guys are doing. You're coming to us as a Loomie. Is that what you call them?
Yep. We do call them Loomies. Yeah, as the name says, we are an AI company. We're really a deep learning based artificial intelligence company. We do avatars for enterprise. So we have a lot of technology to help enterprises bring avatars into their products. And so that includes, building, so generally SDKs and APIs that can be integrated to allow one to take a single selfie and turn that into a 3D avatar, which is what you're looking at right now of me.
And I know that's built into like last generation Samsung Galaxy phones.
Yeah, some of that tech we actually licensed to Samsung. It was on 70 million phones. So we've had some success in this area and integrating with OEMs in particular.
So why come up? Now you guys have I've played around with it. You have a consumer version of it. I've got the app on my phone. And so why come up with a consumer version of this? And it's free, by the way. Well, at least you haven't billed me yet. I haven't found a way to bill What's the thinking around that?
Well, early on, I started with the company in February, and within a week or two, it became evident that the COVID-19 was going to be more than just an isolated event in China, that this was going to become a pandemic. And so we began discussing internally ways that we could help. And within a few weeks, we decided, let's take some of this tech that we've built as a B2B company, for other enterprises, and see if we can't, leverage some of that just to help out the millions of people working from home. So we had already built a product called Loom.AI, which is a mobile app. You can get it on iOS and Android. And with that, you could take a photo of yourself. It creates a 3D avatar, and you can customize it. And that's free. And we really built that as a demonstrator for our B2B kind of sales pipeline, so that when we talk to a company, we could show them some of this tech. But what we decided to do was to take our audio SDK and drive avatars using pure audio to solve a lot of the core issues that exist in video conferencing now.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So what we're watching with you right now is it's not actually integrated with the camera. It's purely integrated with the microphone. How does that work?
Yeah. So we've got SDKs to drive avatars from video, voice, or chat, text. And what you're looking at right now is purely from my voice. And if you look at the fundamental flaws with video conferencing, they come down to a handful of things. People want their privacy. Not many people have the beautiful office you see in my background right now, and they don't want to show their home office on camera when they're
dirty laundry.
Exactly, and the kid running behind them. They're worried about their appearance. Millions of people right now want to get on video conference in their PJs, and so we allow them to do that. Generally speaking, if you're on a video call, your gaze is not directly at the camera. Really and therefore, yours is great right now. You're doing a fantastic job.
And I'll tell you, as a presenter, I do this for a living, right? I've been presenting live and on video for decades. And without a teleprompter, it's impossible to keep your gaze at the camera. I want to look at you. And it comes across. It's really hard to do.
It is. And it causes a disconnect for the listener when you're looking at all these faces and yet none of them are looking directly at you. It's hard to gauge whether they're actually paying attention to you or not. Yeah. And so we've addressed that. And then the last one's a little bit more esoteric. But as human beings, we've evolved to engage in the body language and facial gestures of people around us. And we generally are in either a single conversation or a group conversation. We're generally looking at one face at a time. And we turn to look at another face and another face. With Zoom and Skype and all these amazing video conference tools that are out there, suddenly we're looking at a lot of faces constantly. And it's much harder to gauge some of the reactions. You don't see the body language as much, and it's very off-putting for people. And there's a term, some people use, they call it Zoom fatigue because Zoom's so popular right now. But there's just this fatigue of being on video conference all the time is really tough for people.
And so what's happening is our brains are trying to process 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 times more information in a scene than we're actually wired to process. Is that kind of what's happening?
Exactly. Yep. And so what I'm doing right now, I have a headset on and I'm actually pacing around. I'm walking. I could take notes. I can lay back on my couch.
You could be on the toilet.
I could be on the beach. I'm not going to comment whether that is true or not.
That's awesome because oftentimes I do these long interviews and I'm drinking coffee, and at the end I'm like, I really gotta go. I'm busting for a pee, and it would be a great solution. I could just put on my avatar, head to the bathroom, nobody'd know.
Yeah, so this is really, this is really good for listeners. A lot of these times you're on a call with a lot of people and you need to listen in, but you don't need to speak. It's a great way to take your eye off the monitor for a while. Maybe you can take some notes. Maybe you can multitask, answer a few emails, that sort of thing. And then as a presenter, there's certainly times you want to be in, what I'll quote is live action, what you look like right now with a real camera.
Yeah.
But there's other times where maybe you want to read from, some notes that you've written down, or maybe you want to pace around the room. If I really get serious about a conversation, I like to walk around. I like to jot things on walls. Being able to drive this avatar who's always present, always looking at camera, always engaged, and yet being able to open up these opportunities it's really freeing.
Yeah, interesting. And so now you guys are doing you've done an integration with Brad Herman's company Spaces around their
Yeah.
kind of VR avatar. Can you talk about other integrations where people are going to start to see Loomies show up in applications they might find?
I can't talk about specific deals that we're working on, but I can talk about the types of projects we're really interested in, that we've got active engagement with. And they generally fall in five, 4 or 5 buckets. One of them that really inspired me, because I've done a lot with faces over the last 20 years of my career. But when I saw what LoomAI had done with text, that became very interesting. So right now, if you get online on a website and up pops one of those little things in the corner, how can I help you? About half of that is driven by an AI chatbot at the moment. It's very impersonal, but sometimes it's a quick way to get some information one way or the other. We can take the same SDK that I'm using right now live to communicate with you, can take the output of one of those chatbots and drive a character instead. So imagine you are Geico Insurance, and you could have your lizard pop up, and the lizard could talk to you, and then you could talk back to it. And that AI chatbot, which some of them are very sophisticated and they're improving very quickly, can now have a face. You can have a face to your brand and on your website. And that, maybe you don't have a lizard as a representative, but it could be an avatar like this with a branded shirt that says United or whatever your company's name is. And it can engage with your customers. And a lot of companies suggest that when there is a face to their customer service or their virtual assistants, that suddenly they can not only help build their brand, but they can build trust with their customers as well.
I think usage, just for the novelty factor too, would go through the roof.
Mm-hmm.
So is that a standard product that you guys offer, or is that like a custom integration that you have to do?
So that is a capability that our SDK has right now, and we're in active conversations with groups that produce AI chatbots, and we think we're the perfect companion to go with that.
Microsoft, if you're listening, animated Clippy with real
there we go. Yeah.
I'm not going to rest until I see that.
Yeah, it's come a long way since the 80s, since we had the paper clip bouncing around. So that's one area that we're looking at. If you think about voice devices, the Alexas, the Siris, all of these pieces of hardware, they don't have a face to them either. And certainly that is an area, it'd be very easy to add a screen to these devices and to put an avatar. And that could be the brand, their avatar. It could be an avatar of your choice, but could be a much more natural way to engage with a voice device and a piece of hardware than you do right now.
Yeah, interesting.
And then in games and AR and VR, I just came out of working in the VR space for the last 5 years. And one of the things that really got me engaged in VR was that, you put one of these headsets on and you look out and you see these amazing worlds, but no one ever looks back at you when you're in that space. You can't really have a face-to-face conversation in that space. But obviously with what I'm showing you right now, that is possible. So this avatar could be tracked even with the big black box on my face.
Yeah.
And what I could see would be your avatar. And we could be meeting in a virtual world, really engaged with one another. And it would feel far more real than what companies are showing today.
Yeah, and the challenge there with VR is people want social experiences, and so the workarounds have been like names floating over, or I think Dreamscape did one of the best jobs of the workaround where you had a different color and then you had to shake hands with people to kind of allow that to cement like who was each color, but it's not the natural way we recognize people. And you know, Spacers did an interesting thing with the Terminator, where they'd scan your face, but it didn't move. And so it was a terrible uncanny valley experience that was really creepy. And so I think what you guys are doing when location-based VR comes back is actually going to, you know, add an exponential quality to those experiences, because they'll truly be able to be social. And so I'm looking forward to seeing who implements this.
Yeah, I totally agree. And in the meantime, this is just as valuable for games. So right now I'm wearing my kid's gamer headset. If our SDK was embedded in a game in Fortnite, you could see your Fortnite character with your live facial expressions, and you could be communicating with others. Now, Fortnite might not be the right type of game for that. It might be one where there's more interaction with other players on a face-to-face level. But certainly we've opened up an opportunity for a new type of game to be built and a new way for players to interact with other players in that space.
Yeah, so let's talk about Fortnite for a second, since you brought it up. You know, there's a lot of talk and writing about, you know, Epic Games building the metaverse and Fortnite transitioning to this, you know, perpetual world that we drop in and out of whenever we want and spend more and more time in. And they've just launched this new party island where you can go and just hang out, where nobody shoots you and you don't die. That's been my problem with Fortnite. It's not very good. I hung up my gamer cred about 10 years ago when my kids got better than Halo. And so I couldn't go because I'd last for 10 seconds and I'd be dead, and I couldn't even experience it. And so now you can go and hang out and watch Diplo on the stage doing a concert. How is all this going to come together, and how are you guys playing in that world, and what do you see as far as the metaverse getting developed?
Well, it is a brand new space, and certainly there have been other companies, you know, working on this idea of a metaverse, you know, dating back to the 90s, really.
Second Life, right?
Yep, Second Life. Yep. And it is, you know, it's one of the things that inspired me to get into VR. I think that with real-time computer graphics, with, you know, technologies like what I'm showing you right now to drive an avatar from audio or from text, opens up a possibility that just has never existed before. And certainly Epic is, you know, I went to 2 of the concerts, 2 weeks ago, was just incredible. And I haven't been to the Party Island yet, but I'm amazed at their ability to come up with new ideas that are more and more rich every time. And I'm sure they're not the only people working on it.
Oh, I know they're not. Obviously, Facebook's working on it too, right? And and so, what was your take on the Travis Scott event?
I thought it was a ton of fun and a fantastic way. In fact, my 9-year-old went to at least 3 concerts. You know, to be able to witness and experience the same thing from a different viewpoint with different friends, you know, and really be inside of that experience as opposed to just witnessing it like you would at a normal concert is really tremendous. I would have loved to have seen better facial expressions on Travis Scott, but that comes from the type of company I'm at right now. Yeah. But I thought that it was really fantastic and spectacular.
Yeah, interesting. And did you do it from in the game, or did you watch it out? Because I've heard people talk about that it was one of those things you had to actually experience in the game.
Yeah, we did it in the game. Yeah. I'm right there with you. I'm a terrible Fortnite player, but my 9-year-old is an ace, so we got a chance to. He toured us in and kind of showed us as a family.
Did he have your back?
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. So what's going to happen? So one of the things I'm concerned about is as avatars become more available, as we start accepting an avatar as a proxy for a person, right? Like this may be you, it may not be you. Now I know you well enough to believe that this is you, right? But there's no authentication process that tells me that this is Doug Griffin, right? And so as this becomes more and more prevalent, how are we going to handle the verification, the validation, people showing up as other people and us believing it, and And how do we manage that? Because I'm really worried about that. I think that's going to be a massive problem.
Yeah, I'm really worried about it as well. You know, we've taken if you look at what's happening in the deep fake space, there's some fantastic technical work people are doing with very dangerous potential consequences. And as a company, we've stepped back. You know, we're not a facial recognition company. We're not a deep fake company. You mentioned the uncanny valley earlier. We've even gone, you know, earlier than the uncanny valley. So if people aren't familiar with that, it talks about people's emotional response to avatars, and the more realistic an avatar becomes, you find this big dip in that emotional response. So if you look at Polar Express, Beowulf, you know, things that got a bit more realistic, you could tell things were off, and it was very off-putting for viewers. We've pulled back more towards a somewhat, you know, cartoony look. This is, you know, obviously no one's going to believe this is actually me. You know, we wanted to be well before the uncanny valley so that our avatars appeared friendly and comforting and not creepy.
Yeah.
But I'm really worried. There's a lot of work in the deepfake space and a lot of work with voices as well, in terms of training voices to sound, you know, to basically make an AI voice sound like anyone's voice, and then you can kind of guide it along to say what you want. It's a scary time, and I think you have to rely both on developers to do things that are in the public's best interest, but you can't completely rely on that. I think that, you know, we have to look at the ability of governments to regulate that space as well.
Doesn't there have to be some kind of, you know, and maybe blockchain can help or something, but it feels like, so for example, if this were a business meeting and you showed up in an avatar, and I'm wondering if this is even happening yet, of people wondering, oh, is that really you? Can you show me your actual head? Does there need to be a best practice where you start as a real person and you go to your avatar? Because, you know, I would think in business meetings where there's highly confidential stuff being talked about, that, you know, this could be a concern for people already. I'm wondering.
Yeah, and if it's not, it will be in the next couple of years for sure. I mean, the ability to create a lifelike avatar and have them move and sound like a real person is getting more and more real on a daily basis. And I'm not sure how that's going to be regulated. But I think it's an important consideration. I wish I had an answer or a suggestion on how it should be, you know, worked on.
My guess is there'll be somebody will come out with a blockchain solution to that, where, you know, you own a key to your avatar, and there's a way to. I'm not a blockchain guy, barely understand the concept, so I can't even talk about it more than that. But hopefully, Bill Ty, you're working on this shit.
Yeah, there might be some solution in that space.
Yeah, maybe we'll get Bill on the show and we'll talk a little bit about how blockchain can protect avatars in the future. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly easy for me to change my avatar experience. Like right now, you're looking at my work avatar. I could switch over to my personal avatar. You know, this is my COVID-19. I haven't shaved for a few days. Hair is getting a little bushy.
Yeah,
but you know,
avatar.
But you know, I could certainly change. I could change gender. I could change ethnicity. I mean, it's very easy for me to take a very different personal appearance. So,
yeah, interesting. Yep. You know, and that was one of the things I've experienced, and you and I talked about this offline on social media, where I was presenting at a couple of conferences on a couple of different virtual platforms, and the avatar selection was super binary and limited, and the only way I could have hair that and that's how people recognize me. It's not like, well, maybe I am vain about my hair, but that wasn't the primary reason. I was like, I realized that's how people recognize me in a crowd. Mm-hmm. At Laval Virtual, there were like, I don't know, 10,000 people registered for this conference virtually. And I wanted to be able to be recognized. And so I wanted my hair to be somewhat similar to what I had. And the only way I could have long hair was to select a female avatar, which then gave me boobs. And I'm fine with that, you know, but I just feel like in this day of gender fluidity and times when gender is so important to someone's identity, and there's so much going on in that space, you know, the work that you guys are doing is really critical to giving people the ability to show up the way they want to show up in the world, because we get that ability now. Like people people have fought for that for decades. For my entire life, marginalized people around sexual identity have had to show up the way society said they had to show up. And now I'm seeing tech companies create avatars that are putting those constraints back on people. And I think that's just totally unacceptable in this day and age. And so what you guys are doing is awesome.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, and we're trying to make it so not only do we generate an avatar that resembles you to begin with, but to provide a significant number of editable attributes. And we don't have your hairstyle in there yet, but it's very easy to personalize and create that sort of second version of yourself that you feel good about. And we want to continue to add assets to that Lumi app so that people can really
I think just
have fun with it.
You got the length like that, and then you got the rock god one that comes down. You've got your nipples, but I think the shoulder length cut one more level, and you've got it nailed. And
you'll have to give us a 3D scan of your head or something to nail that haircut.
So one of the things Terry Schussler said from Deutsche Telekom when I interviewed him a couple of weeks ago was that we're going to have, like, the fact that all of these LiDAR cameras are coming in iPhones and they're already in iPads, and they're going to be moving into more devices, that we'll have the ability to do holographic capture of our heads, our bodies in our houses, possibly this year. What do you see that happening? And if so, how does that impact this whole concept of having potentially photorealistic 3D avatars?
Well, in some ways that's been available for some time. I mean, there was the Connect software that connected to a Connect years ago that you could scan your room or scan a person and put them in there. There's a few companies working on the hologram space now. The big problem with holograms, and to create a compelling one, is to have enough coverage to not have these big occluded areas. So if you've got a single iPhone with the depth sensor in it, the moment I raise my arm, it's going to create an occlusion behind there, a shadow behind there, and it's going to leave a space in that 3D mesh or point cloud. And so that's the problem.
You might need multiple cameras. You have to get your kids' phones and your wife or your husband's phone, your mom's phone.
And suddenly it's not practical. Yeah, and that's the problem, is the practicality of having multiple different camera views or scanner views. I think that's the limiting factor.
Now
allowing that to be real.
Capture studios pop up, and they used to be hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Sometimes millions.
Just a couple of years ago, there were millions of dollars, right? And that price seems to be coming down. Are we going to see motion capture, like drive-through motion capture pop-ups around where you can go and get your hologram for $10?
Yeah, there's already been pop-ups in malls that use a number of cameras, usually SLR cameras, to take a single photo of you and then to 3D print that version of you. In fact, Mother's Day is coming up this weekend. A few years ago, I took my kids and our dog, and we went to one of these places. We scanned ourselves, and I 3D printed these little 6-inch, action figures of us to give to my wife for Mother's Day.
So that tech's out now, really.
That tech's been, it's been out there, and in theory, it could be there for holograms as well. One of the guys, Steve Sullivan, who I worked with at ILM, really bright guy. He was head of R&D at ILM, has gone on to work at Microsoft, and he's heading up their efforts in this space. And they are opening up these centers now where anyone could go in and actually capture this sort of 3D volume of them doing something in one of their studios.
What amazing times we're living in.
It sure is. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for joining. Anything else happening in the near future that that you guys are working on that you want to let people know about?
Right now, we're kind of heads down trying to allow people to use these tools. So again, you mentioned they were free. We've got an app called Lumi on iOS and Android that allows you to create these avatars. We've got a desktop version that plugs into Zoom and Skype and Hangouts and Uber Conference and all these things. That's called Lumi Live. Right now, that's available on Mac. And in a couple weeks, we'll have a Windows version of that. And then we're really interested in how people could use this in the streaming space as well. If you look at, Twitch You know, how many of these people might want to come in as their avatar while they're talking about a game? And so we're looking at doing maybe a pro version as well that included a green screen that used our video SDK, so you could track, more gestures and how you're moving around.
Yeah.
And so we think there's a big opportunity. And then from a general perspective, like right now on my computer, I'm translating my audio to this avatar, rendering out a video in real time, and transmitting that video to Australia where you are.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of bandwidth that we're using back and forth with video. We're very inspired about what could happen if you just transmitted these animation curves, because they are very, very, very small compared to video. And so we could be transmitting audio to you and the animation curves, and on your end, your computer could do the very lightweight rendering of me in real time. If you could play a game, you can render. And we're very interested in how that might help organizations reduce their cloud component costs, reduce latency, allow this to work on mobile phones, for instance, so I could actually just be on a handheld device up to my ear, but what you could see on the other end would be my avatar. So we think there's a lot of opportunities around this video conferencing space, and we want to provide as much of those tools for free for people to use, and also look for large partners that we could integrate some of this tech with as well.
Yeah, fascinating. So if you want to check this out, I highly recommend look for Loomy on any of the on iOS and I assume the Google Play Store. Then the website is Loom.AI, and that has links to the apps also. And then you can download the Mac version, and we'll watch for a Windows version. Do you have a date for the Windows version yet?
Probably about 3 weeks out.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And
yeah, coming quick.
So by the end of May, you should have a Windows version of this, and we'll all be able. We won't have to. It won't just be the Mac guy or the PC guy.
we can meet in the middle.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Doug Griffin,
hey, great chatting with you, Bob.
Yeah, I really appreciate you you coming on, telling us a little bit about this and the work that you're doing. Congratulations to the team. I think the work you're doing is actually really important. For the way we represent ourselves in this new virtual world that we're being thrust into, whether we like it or not. And I think it's critical. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for the comments.